anarchy. A world consumed by greed, hate, and uncertainty. A place where governments are ruled by fear, corruption, and tyranny. A place where the greatest ideals of humanity never prevailed. But this world is only one possibility. To understand which civilization was truly better, Greece or Rome, we must examine the ideas they created, as well as the world they left behind.
Imagine a world that lacked order, reason, and structure, all the qualities of a strong government. While we credit American democracy to the Romans, really it was the Greeks who laid the foundation for a society that would flourish.
The entire concept of the Roman Republic was only partially democratic despite its name. The real power was held in the hands of the few rich, leading to its ultimate downfall. The Greeks were the first ones to truly give power to the many and not restrict power to social class.
For instance, in Athens, the free male citizen would vote directly on laws and policies.
By contrast, Rome's assemblies elected magistrates, but real power still was in the hands of the elite families that ran the Senate.
While it was far from perfect, the success of Greece's early ideas of democracy were what gave confidence that such forms of government could even exist. This confidence was what helped Rome later embrace Greek philosophical ideas in politics and improve their own system of governance. This further supports our claim that every original idea the Romans had has a Greek original foundation or beginning.
The Greeks were the ones who first stressed the concept of reason, allowing the Romans to follow them by creating a system of government that used that idea.
Both Athenian democracy and the Roman Republic were founded around the same time, but the Greeks were the ones who truly stressed the idea of reason, the basis of both these systems of government.
Greeks also developed early systems of power balancing. We call them checks and balances now. The idea that a government should be ruled by the people for the people ultimately came from Greece, not Rome. While the Romans did implement a similar system, the Greeks were the ones who truly laid the foundation.
The Romans believed they could create a system more efficient than the Greeks, but with Rome's complex system and a senate made up of rich patricians, it would ultimately collapse into civil war and dictatorship. Followed by an empire that would rule Rome for the rest of its time. Because emperors took power based on lineage, leaders were able to abuse their authority, such as Nero, who expedited the fall of the empire with tragedies like the burning of Rome. So you decide, who's more important, the founder or the one who built on the foundation?
These ideas of reason didn't come out of nowhere. They came from a movement that reshaped Greek society forever, philosophy.
With exposure of different cultures from trade, Greek intellectuals began to wonder how their religion and worldview fit into that of other societies. To solve this, the Greeks created major schools of thought such as Stoicism, Epicureanism, Platonism, Skepticism, and Pythagoreanism, just to name a few. These schools of thought are some of the exact ideas the Romans would later build upon.
Roman philosophers like Lucretius needed Greeks like Epicurus to come up with the original ideas they would later use in their philosophy. While some historians say that the Romans developed and improved upon the Greeks, making their philosophy more advanced, without the innovation of the Greeks, there would be no foundation to stand on. By taking the first step in creating this new radical school of thought, the Romans had ideas to build upon.
Some Roman philosophers, like Lucretius, even recognized the Greek philosophers that came before him as some of the greatest thinkers to ever live.
Even Epicurus went, his light of life ran out, the man and genius who overtopped the human race, extinguishing all others, as sun in either horizon all the stars. This was Lucretius' way of praising Epicurus for his brilliance, in his eyes a man better than all others, and reminding men of the mortality of our race, stating that if even Epicurus could die, then we all surely can. Almost every major Roman school of thought was based on an original Greek philosopher or school. The Greeks had abstract ideas which the Romans turned into strategies they could use in their daily life. Making philosophy more practical might seem like a good idea on the surface, but in practice, it involved going away from the Greeks' original ideas. Epicureanism attempted to answer one of Greeks' earlier questions, what a good life was. Eventually, it would be turned into an excuse to live overly extravagant lifestyles by the Romans.
Some Roman philosophers saw Greeks as some of the greatest thinkers ever, even though they lived in a time period much after them. This gave the Romans less access to a wider range of ideas, because the act of changing the pure abstract heavenly truths of Greek philosophy to a practical, earthly form tainted the ideas and drastically moved them away from their original.
Roman philosophers tried to emulate the radical innovation of Greek philosophy, but making it more practical also made it less effective. This is what started the legacy of Roman corruption and the move away from a reasonable system of government, such as democracy.
Despite this, many core ideas were adapted by the Romans from the Greeks, such as the idea that death should not be feared during life. This proves just how important the Greeks were to Roman philosophy, since everything they created was just an adaptation, and almost everything they changed eventually failed. While in other disciplines, the claim can be made that the Romans improved on the Greeks, in terms of art, the Romans were extremely jealous of the Greeks' skills. Some of the greatest works of art by the Roman Republic were either marble copies of Greek originals or were made by Greek artists who were hired by Roman patricians. Literature was no different, with Roman authors borrowing tremendously from old Greek works, such as Homer's Odyssey and Virgil's Aeneid. Many playwrights were also trying to become the next Menander. Art came with the conquest of Greece. For epic, the hexameter superseded the old Italian Saturnian used by Navius, and Roman writers began to imitate Greek tragedy, though with insufficient attention to polish.
Even Romans recognized that in their attempt to create art, they looked to Greek ideas, which ended up resulting in works that were lesser than the original. In material art, this looked like Roman artists being skipped over by the elites, who chose to import Greek statues and make marble copies of old bronzes. The idea that Romans would import from the Greeks, rather than use Roman artists, shows just how superior the Greek skill was. That's why it's clear that art forms like painting, sculpture, and literature had foundations laid by the Greeks, who mastered innovative techniques that would be imitated by the Romans later. Through records and letters between patricians, it becomes clear that Greek art was valued as equal or even higher than Roman art. Romans would pay crazy fees to ship over Greek pieces as opposed to hiring other Romans.
Cicero is a prime example of this, who was willing to pay the wage of 40 Roman soldiers just for a couple of Greek statues. Clearly, Roman elites were willing to go to extreme measures to get their hands on Greek art. Literature was the same, as Romans were some of the biggest fans of Greek writing in all of history.
Quintilian said, "The careful study of Menander alone would, in my opinion, be sufficient to develop all those qualities with the production of which my present work is concerned. So perfect is his representation of actual life, so rich is his power of invention and his gift of style." Quintilian was a famous rhetoric teacher in Rome, who saw Menander's work as the epitome of comedy, and Roman plays as falling short. Menander, being a famous Greek playwright, symbolized not the bar, but as Romans like Quintilian would say, the ultimate goal. From government to art, Greeks created the fundamental principles that would guide each discipline for generations to come.
Ultimately, the Roman culture at its base was an adaptation of Greek society, an adaptation that some felt to be an improvement, but it would eventually come to collapse, and as educated Romans saw it, inferior to the Greek original.